The story begins far from Earth on a highly advanced planet called Krypton. The people of this planet may look like humans, however, they are far more advanced beings with powers beyond human imagination, and they can live for thousands of years. Meanwhile, a pregnant woman is giving birth to a baby. Despite being a highly advanced world, Krypton has been suffering from extinction. Babies on this planet are usually created through high-tech methods. However, this child is different. He is the first naturally born child in thousands of years. While her husband helps her through the process, the woman finally gives birth to the extraordinary baby. The father, Jor-El, stands beside her and watches the birth carefully, and soon the child who will become Superman comes into the world. Meanwhile, the rulers of Krypton gather in a council meeting to discuss the planet's future. Krypton is struggling for survival because its core is collapsing, and Jor-El strongly urges the council to hand over the Codex so he can attempt a final effort to save their people. However, the ruthless General Zod suddenly storms in with his soldiers and attacks the council, blaming them for the fall of Krypton. Zod then offers Jor-El a chance to join him so they can build a new kingdom together. However, Jor-El refuses to stand beside a monster and openly opposes him. Zod immediately tries to attack. However, Jor-El outsmarts him, and this sparks a brutal fight between two powerful forces of Krypton. While his allies keep Zod's soldiers busy, Jor-El manages to track down the Codex and rushes back to his wife, Lara Lor-Van. Together they locate a distant planet within a habitable zone, which is Earth, and they decide to send their child there so he can escape the chaos consuming Krypton. Before launching the escape pod, Jor-El inserts the essence of the Codex into his son, ensuring that the last hope of rebuilding Krypton will live within him. However, before they can send the pod safely away, General Zod attacks the facility. Zod already knows Jor-El has the Codex and demands it immediately. Instead, Jor-El reveals a shocking truth that for the first time in centuries, a natural child has been born on Krypton, and that child has already been sent away carrying the Codex. Hearing this, Zod's rage explodes, and he violently attacks Jor-El. Unable to stop the escape pod, Zod stabs Jor-El in anger and kills him. After that, Zod turns toward Lara, the mother who has just lost her husband and sent her child so far away that she may never hear his voice again. However, Lara firmly refuses to reveal the location of the pod. Zod then orders his men to bring the pod down. However, before they can reach it, the probe disappears in the blink of an eye. Soon the Council's forces capture Zod. Zod is declared guilty of rebellion, and the Council sentences him to 300 cycles of somatic reconditioning, which effectively means he is being thrown into a black hole prison. As the guards drag him away, Zod swears that one day he will return and take revenge on the Council, and with this, Krypton meets its end. The planet breaks into pieces while Lara watches helplessly as her world slowly turns into space dust. With that, the story moves to Earth, where Kal-El now lives under the name Clark Kent and works as a helper on a fishing boat. While he spends his days trying to stay unnoticed, a sudden announcement changes everything. A nearby oil rig catches fire, and with no immediate help around, Clark has to step in for the rescue. He breaks through a window and enters the rig while flames burn all around him. Yet the fire barely affects the man with unmatched power. One by one, he helps the workers get onto the rescue helicopter, becoming the last man left on the rig. The guards urge him to jump onto the helicopter, unaware that this man is not in danger, he is the danger. Clark saves the rescue team from a falling pillar and then drops into the water. As he sinks beneath the surface, his mind drifts back to his childhood. When Clark was a kid sitting in class, he looked extremely terrified because he could not control his powerful senses. Even the small sound of a pencil scratching on paper felt like a brick hitting his head. Unable to handle the voices and sounds around him, Clark ran out of the classroom and hid inside a dark room. Most people in the class believed Clark had some kind of mental problem, while the teacher kept banging on the door, clearly annoyed by his daily panic episodes. Soon his mother Martha Kent was called to the school. Martha understood what her son was going through, so she calmly told him to focus only on her voice. Clark slowly listened to her and began to calm down, and after a moment, he finally opened the door. Back in the present, Clark snaps out of the memory and climbs out of the water while looking for some clothes to wear. As he walks toward the road, he notices a school bus passing by, and that sight triggers another memory from his childhood when he was bullied by a jerk in class. One day, out of nowhere, the bus tire suddenly burst while they were crossing a bridge. The driver lost control, and the bus crashed straight into the water with children trapped inside, unable to breathe or escape. Just when things looked hopeless, the entire bus suddenly rose out of the water without any outside help. It was young Clark Kent who had lifted the bus himself. He even dove back into the water and pulled out the same bully who used to trouble him, leaving the whole school shocked. Later at home, the incident led to a serious discussion between Clark's parents. His mother tried to defend him and called it nothing more than an act of God. However, his father never believed that explanation. He always knew it was something far beyond a simple coincidence, because Clark was clearly different. He feared how the world might react if people discovered Clark's extraordinary powers, and he worried it could bring danger to his son. So he took Clark to the garage where he had hidden the small space pod that originally brought Kal-El to Earth, along with a strange USB-like material. Jonathan had shown that material to some of the best meteorologists, and all of them agreed it was unlike anything on the periodic table, something that certainly did not come from Earth. Jonathan already knows the truth that Clark is an alien, and if the world discovers that too soon, it could bring serious harm to his young son. Meanwhile, Clark understands everything his father said, and keeps a low profile for the coming years. He keeps doing odd jobs, from oil rigs to cafeterias, just to stay afloat. One day while he is working in a restaurant, a couple of jerks start harassing his co-worker, Christy. Clark politely tells the man to leave her alone. However, in this world, politeness is often taken as weakness. The man insults Clark by spilling beer on his face. However, Clark does not fight back and simply returns to his work while everyone around laughs at him. But when the bullies walk outside, they find their truck hanging on a tree like a set of clothes left out to dry, leaving the bully completely shocked. Meanwhile, Clark later begins working with a team as an assistant in Antarctica, where Lois Lane, the famous reporter, shows up to cover a story. Lois loves her job, and what brings her here is her determination to uncover the truth, despite the authorities insisting that everything is running normally. However, Lois knows there is far more to the story than what they are saying. The scientists have discovered a strange object buried inside the ice, something that does not look like it belongs to Earth. The ice surrounding the object is nearly 20,000 years old, which means whatever this thing is, it is even older than the human civilizations we know. Later that night, Lois spots Clark sneaking out alone. She follows him through the dangerous icy rocks. Meanwhile, Clark uses his heat vision to melt the ice and clear a path to the probe hidden beneath it. Clark then takes out the key his father gave him during childhood, and as soon as he inserts the key into the alien machine, it activates a hologram showing his real father, Jor-El. While Clark is trying to understand the hologram, Lois is detected by the automated defense system, which throws her violently into a wall. Clark rushes to rescue her, however she has already suffered serious injuries from the fall. Clark then uses his heat vision to seal her wounds, and when Lois opens her eyes, she finds herself lying alone on the Antarctic ice. Soon, Lois returns to the city with memories of the mysterious man still in her mind. She pushes her boss to publish the story, however it sounds either too ridiculous or too fictional to believe. Perry coldly refuses to support it, but Lois is not ready to give up that easily. She approaches another firm, hoping they will believe her evidence and publish the story. Meanwhile, Clark returns to the ship with countless questions swirling in his mind. Jor-El understands the confusion in his son's eyes and begins explaining how Kal-El from Krypton became Clark Kent on Earth. While Krypton was struggling for survival, Jor-El was leading the search for a solution, trying to find a way for their people to survive. That was when Zod launched a coup and turned against his own race. Jor-El explains what Clark's existence means for the future of Krypton and asks him to wear the most precious artifact of their family, the suit. This planet has proven far more helpful for young Kal-El than Jor-El ever imagined, because the lower gravity and the weaker sun have helped his body grow stronger. Clark steps out of the ship proudly wearing the suit and begins testing his powers, which even surprises him. On the other hand, Lois refuses to give up on finding the mysterious man. She travels from town to town searching for Clark, and eventually she ends up meeting his mother, Martha Kent. While questioning Martha, Lois later finds Clark standing in a graveyard and asks why someone with the power to save humanity is hiding from the world. Clark then shares a painful memory from his past. He remembers the day he had a serious argument with his father, who always wanted him to stay hidden. While they were arguing inside the car, a massive storm suddenly struck the area and they both rushed out to help people evacuate safely. Clark went to save his mother while his father risked his life to help others during the storm. In the end, his father died in the disaster, and Clark was forced to let him go because his father insisted he must stay hidden, believing that the world was still not ready for him. The story breaks something inside Lois, and she decides it is truly in Clark's favor that he stays low. She goes back to Perry and asks for her story to be dropped. Back at his remote house, Clark meets his mother, and for the first time, he feels content. Clark has finally found his true identity. However, this does not change the fact that she is still his mother. But the peace does not last long as the military detects mysterious alien ships heading straight toward Earth. Shortly after the ships are located, they take control of global transmissions and broadcast a disturbing message. They say they are here for Kal-El, who is hiding on Earth, and if the planet wants to remain unharmed, it must hand him over. On Earth, Lois is the only one who truly understands the warning. However, one mistake is about to put Clark's life in danger. A reporter who had earlier received information about Clark suddenly blurts everything out live on TV, and the FBI soon arrives at Lois's door before she can escape. Unable to decide whether he should stay hidden or finally accept his true self, Clark walks into a church. The priest tells him to listen to his heart and do what he believes is right to save his people. Clark does exactly that. He turns himself in to the authorities, who then bring him face to face with Lois. She cannot help but question why Clark is risking his life. Impressed by his courage, Lois suggests that Clark should be called Superman. Meanwhile, Clark calmly snaps the handcuffs in half and then turns toward the general. Clark explains that he has lived on Earth all his life and has never harmed anyone. He sees the people of Earth as his own people, and he will do everything he can to make sure the planet stays safe. As a result, he is taken to the location where Zod asked him to appear. Moments later, an alien ship arrives and Zod's soldiers come out to take both him and Lois Lane. As soon as they enter the ship, Lois is given a mask to breathe through, while Clark instantly begins to weaken because even though he is Kryptonian, he has never lived on Krypton, and now the atmosphere feels completely alien to him. Zod mocks Superman for turning weak, and then reveals his sinister plan to transform Earth into a replica of Krypton. Clark sacrificed himself for Earth. However, the fear of uncertainty now hangs over the planet's future. While Clark slowly loses consciousness on the ship, he suddenly opens his eyes and hears Zod explaining how Jor-El once took the Codex, the only hope of rebuilding Krypton. Now Zod wants that Codex because he believes he can revive his planet. But Clark is more concerned about Earth than Krypton. To him, Earth is home. Zod coldly explains that every civilization needs a foundation, and if Krypton is to rise again, Earth must die. With that horrifying thought, the vision suddenly ends, and Clark wakes up in shock. Meanwhile, Jor-El tries to help his son with Lois's help. He sends the ship's structure and instructions to Lois so she can follow the escape plan. Jor-El's assistance makes it easier for Lois to move around inside the ship. She follows the commands and shoots the guards who try to stop her along the way. Meanwhile, Superman regains consciousness and breaks himself free. While Lois's pod has already left the ship, he follows his father's instructions and pulls Lois out of the pod safely. At the same time, Zod and his men arrive at Clark's home and begin threatening his mother. Poor Martha refuses to help them, however she is no match for Zod. He lifts her into the air and throws her aside. In the very next moment, Superman arrives and drags Zod across the fields, smashing his face into the ground for hurting his mother. During the fight, Zod's mask breaks, and now his senses are exposed to Earth's atmosphere, causing him to lose focus. However, before Superman can finish him off, the alien ship appears and rescues Zod. Meanwhile, the army launches an attack on Zod and his soldiers to protect the planet. Out in the streets, Superman fights Zod's soldiers, who slowly begin to overpower him. Just when he struggles to fight one of them, another soldier arrives, and now he is forced to face two powerful enemies at once. Even the small help he receives from humans fails to make any real impact because Zod's warriors are too strong. Finally, Superman uses his heat vision and slices through their bodies, and after a long, brutal fight, he manages to kill the most dangerous one. However, before dying, she warns Superman that they will not hesitate to kill millions if he refuses to hand over the Codex. Despite the destruction, the battle earns Superman respect from humans. The people who once saw him as a threat now begin to see him as their only hope against the aliens. Back on the alien ship, the scientists make a shocking discovery. Superman's DNA is a perfect match for the Codex genetics, which means he himself carries the Codex within him. Zod wonders if Superman even needs to stay alive. However, the scientist explains that they can still extract the DNA even after his death. Hearing this, Zod decides to go all out, even if it means killing Kal-El. Zod then moves to the next phase of his plan. He wants to transform Earth into a new Krypton, and for that, he activates massive machines that fire powerful beams into the planet and begin changing the atmosphere. This means humanity has very little time left. As the machines begin working, the structure of Earth itself starts to change. The rising gravity causes volcanoes to erupt and oceans to swell. The increased gravity completely disrupts the planet. Rockets launched toward alien ships begin falling back onto the streets, and airplanes start crashing into buildings. In this desperate situation, Superman realizes there is only one solution. His ship, hidden in Antarctica, must collide with the alien machine in a way that creates a black hole strong enough to destroy Zod's equipment. With no other option left, the general agrees to the risky plan. Meanwhile, Superman flies toward the other machine to stop it. However, he struggles to adapt to the rapidly changing atmosphere. Inside the alien ship, the former friends, now enemies, Jor-El and Zod argue once again. Zod wants to rebuild Krypton, even if it means wiping out Earth. However, Jor-El believes this is madness and demands that Zod stop. Eventually, Zod can no longer tolerate Jor-El's consciousness inside the system and destroys it completely. Before fading away, Jor-El leaves one final warning, that his son will return and bring this fight to an end once and for all. Superman goes all out and smashes into the machine, managing to destroy it, and with this, the risk of human extinction is greatly reduced. Meanwhile, Superman goes after Zod and attacks his ship. Once inside the ship, he uses his powerful heat vision to tear through its structure. The ship loses balance and crashes into the buildings, dragging itself through the city and flattening everything that comes in its way. Meanwhile, the Colonel manages to insert the key just in time, and with that, the second machine is swallowed by a tiny black hole. Earth slowly returns to its normal atmosphere. However, the threat is still not completely over because Zod has lost his army, but he still stands against Superman, raging with anger after his entire plan has been destroyed. Now he wants revenge and threatens to take everything Superman cares about. A massive fight begins between the two, tearing through buildings and turning skyscrapers into rubble. During the battle, we learn that Zod can also fire heat vision just like Superman. Meanwhile, Batman can only watch helplessly as his city turns into ruins. While Superman fights Zod, Batman is out on the streets saving people from collapsing buildings. Earth continues to feel the after effects of the gravity shift as debris begins falling from space. However, Superman eventually manages to defeat Zod. After everything is over, Superman returns to his normal life and lives peacefully with his mother. But somewhere deep in space, the Kryptonians may still be raging with anger and looking for revenge, and that is where the story ends.